In this video, I'm going to show you my process on a full mix breakdown, how I mixed MayKar's new single, Oh Yeah. But before we get started, my name is Ed, you're watching Stokes Sounds, and if you like this video, please make sure that you hit the like button, subscribe, and leave a comment. And if you want to support the channel, head over to our website, stokessounds.com. Now let's take a listen to the full mix of the song so you guys can hear what we're working with.
You're so fine, oh yeah. Your beauty so that I can I hold you, baby, no fear. I wanna dance with you, oh yeah, yeah. Can I hug you, oh yeah. Like I suck the perfume you did wear. Like I be the one you did call your dad. You are the kind to call my own.
So you can hear it's a great track, it's very well produced, and it came in also incredibly well as well. So if we actually take a listen to what they sent me, so they had their pre-mix, so their mix version, and then they came to me and asked me to mix it, and so this is the mix that I did for them so you can hear the difference.
You're so fine, oh yeah. Your beauty so that I can I hold you, baby, no fear. I wanna dance with you, oh yeah, yeah. Can I hug you, oh yeah. Like I suck the perfume you did wear. Like I be the one you did call your dad. You are the kind to call my own. You're so fine, oh yeah. Your beauty so that I can I hold you, baby, no fear. I wanna dance with you, oh yeah, yeah. Can I hug you, oh yeah. Like I suck the perfume you did wear. Be the one you did call your dad. You are the kind to call my own.
So as you heard there, my mix is a lot kind of brighter, wider, and just bigger in general, and that's exactly what they wanted. You know, they had it at a really good stage, their production team, and their pre-mix was in a really, really good shape, and so they came to me just to do the final touches, and so you heard the difference there of what that was. So if we now take a look at the individual tracks inside the mix and look at how I processed it, first up, we've got the kick. If we just listen to the kick with all my mixing on, let's just take the processing off. So there's not too much of a difference, but I'm just controlling it. So if we look at the first plugin, I've got Eventide Split EQ, which is one of my favorite EQs for using on drums and percussion, just because it gives me transient and tonal kind of separate. So it means I can, you know, push the transient forward without having a lot of kind of sustain of the harmonics of whatever it is that I'm using it on. In this case, I didn't want a load of sustain of the bottom end of the bass frequency. And so you can see here that I'm just pushing up the transients, the ones in green, around kind of 92, and it looks around 300 hertz. But again, this will change depending on the kick. Usually 300 hertz I actually avoid in kick drums, but for this time I just kind of felt like I wanted to push that transient in that area, and it just felt like the body of the kick was there. So if we take a look at what this plugin is doing with it on and with it off, you'll hear the difference. So you can just see it's given me a little bit more attack and a little bit less sustain, which you can see I've taken out kind of some sub frequencies out just because I felt like there was a little bit of too much of a build up in that area. And again, I've increased, you know, the green, the transients there, just to give it that kind of shape and that boost of the kick that I liked. Next up, we've then got the Spectre, and this is one of my favorite plugins for adding kind of saturation and just kind of shaping the tone of the kick drum. So let's take a listen with this on and with it off. So you can hear it's just giving it a little bit more punch, and I'm kind of boosting around 788 hertz, usually between that area and 1K, and that just kind of, on smaller systems, it just gives me that spit of the kick. And then around this area, around 80, sometimes 60, just depends on the frequency and the style that I'm working on, but around that kind of area is where I'm getting the bottom end thump from the kick. So that's what I did there. Then I had the Little Labs Voice of God, but I decided not to use it, so let's not look at it. And then I followed it up with the Neutron Transient Shaper, and this is just kind of giving me a little bit more extra punch, and I probably added this on towards the end maybe, but you know, this is what we've got with it on and then with it off, and you'll hear what it's doing. So it's very subtle, but it's just giving me that extra oomph that I felt like I needed on the kick. And then we've got a snare. If we take a listen to what the snare's doing. So that snare in this kind of genre of music is really important. You don't want it too loud, you don't want it too quiet, you need it prominent in the mix, but you also don't want it too piercing to the ear, because there's nothing worse than that. Now, if we listen to that same snare with no processing on, Now let's take a look at the processing that I applied. First up, we've got the split EQ, and I'm doing the similar thing with the kick. I'm just boosting the transient of where I like that snare, that percussive hit, and then taking down the tonal kind of element of where I don't want the sustain. Now in this kind of music, you want to have that kind of da 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 kind of really kind of forward in the mix, but at the same time, you don't want it to be too piercing to the ear because it just sounds horrible. So it's really getting that balance between the two, and that's where this plugin is my favorite for drums and percussion, because it just gives me that extra control. So if we take a listen with this plugin on and off, you'll see what it's doing. Very subtle, but it does make a difference to my ears. Then next up, we've got the Pro Q3. Now let's take a listen with this on and with it off, and you'll hear what it's doing. Now you can see I'm doing quite drastic moves here, and it looks like these were just frequencies that were causing a problem to my ears on the day. So if we just have a look at a couple of them, what they are. Now that EQ is actually quite drastic, and I don't always do that, but it definitely is finding a balance. And because this was going to be quite loud in the mix, and it was going to be part of, like, you know, the forefront of the beat, I also wanted it to be kind of really pleasurable to listen to, and they were just frequencies that I just felt like that was just kind of annoying me. And it does look like a lot, but they are kind of small moves apart from the last two. You know, I'm talking 1 or 2 dB on most changes, but here I did do 12 dB on those ones I just played, just because they were poking out. And then I did a low pass filter, and that's just because I just felt like it was a bit digital and I wanted to make it a little bit warmer. So that's why I did that. Then let's take a listen now with the kick and the snare together. They're sounding great together, and then when you get halfway through the chorus, another snare comes in. Now let's take a look at what we actually did. I've got the Pro Q3 here, again, just taking out some frequencies that I felt like were piercing to the ears, and just kind of finding them, kind of sweeping around and just figuring out, okay, what works, what doesn't work with the other snare that I've got. And this is what I came to. So let's listen with this on and with it off, and you'll hear what it's doing. So again, similar to the other snare, it's just kind of controlling certain frequencies. You know, you've got this high end here. You know, to me, they're like electronic frequencies that I just don't like, and it kind of makes things sound cheap, and I wanted it to sound kind of really nice, smooth and expensive and have that kind of warm sound to it. So that's why I did that. And then I brought back my favorite plugin, the split EQ again doing a similar thing to the previous snare, but just a slightly different frequency. It's a little bit more mid-rangey around the 1K mark. And again, this is just so this snare pokes through the other snare. So it's all about making things work in context with each other. Same kind of move, a transient kind of pushed up with a tone pushed down. Again, this is just giving me less sustain and more kind of attack on that certain frequency. So if we listen with this on and with off, you'll hear what it's doing. Again, subtle, but you get the point, you can hear it. And then we've got some claps going on. These claps, I'm trying to remember what they are. They're just like effects. I didn't bother doing anything to these. They didn't need it. Again, don't forget the fundamentals, the basics of just turning volumes up and balancing audio. And you can see here that I really haven't done anything. You'll see that there's some grayed out plugins. That's just because they're in my template if I need them. But as I say, I didn't use them. Again, the producer had printed some delays and things that he liked, because the thing is as well, what you've got to remember is they sent this to me how they kind of visioned it, and the production was really well thought out. They've spent hours on this, and so for me, I didn't have to do too much. It was more just what complements things within the context of what I was given. I've got some more percussion going on. This time I did use some Spectre, again, just boosting some mid-range around 1.2-ish, and it looks like it was just so it could push that percussion element forward in the mix. So I just thought I'd use Spectre for that. And then we've got some more stuff going on here, some stomps. Again, didn't do anything to that. Another one here, didn't do anything to that. Again, you heard they already had that pre-panned. Another element here, did nothing to that. Then there's a shaker. If we take a look at what I didn't do anything to that one either. It's to know when not to do things. You don't always have to put plugins on everything. As you can see here, there isn't too much going on. We've got the tambourine. Again, nothing going on there. We've Got another shaker. Put some EQ on, but decided against it, and I didn't even do anything, so that's another one that's not happening. Then we got a drum fill. I decided to use some more split EQ this time. Again, didn't have an issue with the tone balance of this sample, but I did have an issue of the transient, and I just wanted it to push through and attack more. You could use a transient designer or the Neutron 4, which I showed as well previously. You could use that, but I've got this split EQ and it does the job, so I'm using it. And then I've got some more EQ going on here, just taking out this frequency. Again, horrible frequencies to my ear. That's what it's about. It's about balancing, finding frequencies you don't like, taking them out, and then re-leveling, and that's how you get a mix to kind of sound cohesive together. Then we got some hats. Again, just taking out some frequencies. Sounded good to me, that. So we took that out. And then all together, the drums. Everything feels nice, everything kind of feels balanced, and then we just use this CLA mix down by Chris Lord Alge, and it's incredible. I don't really know again what this plugin does, but it just adds this kind of real nice kind of tone to the actual kind of drum as an overall image. So if we just take away what we've got on the others and let's have a listen with this on and off, and you'll hear what it's doing. It's just kind of pushing everything forward, it's making things brighter, and it's kind of gluing everything together. So I really, really like using this plugin on my drum bass. And then I've got some EQ going on, just taking out some frequencies that I felt like I didn't like, which was this. Again, I'm not doing much. It was really, really well kind of thought out, and the sounds that they chose was really good as well. And then I'm just using a standard clip, and that's just to control the peaks of the overall drum. So when it gets to mastering and I bring up the volume quite a lot, it means that the limiter isn't working as hard. So it means I can get the volume at an LUFS, which is pretty loud, around -6, -7, without the limiter kind of crapping out. So that's what I'm doing here. Probably 1 or 2 dB of clipping. Let's have a listen. Again, you can see there the waveforms, you can see that the red, that's just clipping off those peaks, so the limiter really doesn't have to work too hard. And that's it for the drums. And then we've got the transitions, which is just risers and effects. If we just take a look at what these effects are doing. Again, very, very simple stuff in the track. Just adding nice transitions just to kind of bring everything together. And then all I did here was just take some kind of high end out. And again, that's just to make it sound so it's not so digital. So it just kind of has a bit of kind of smoothness to the top end. So really, really, really subtle stuff. I'm not over processing, just keeping things to a minimum. And then we've got the bass here. The bass had some automation on. So let's just take a look at what the bass sounds like. If we take a look at what we're doing, first up we've got the Fairchild by UAD. This is a really, really good compressor, and it kind of really brightens everything, and that's why I've used it. You'll hear what this is doing now. It kind of brightens up the top end, so it makes the bass a little bit more kind of defined and a bit clearer. So I did that. Again, I'm barely doing any kind of reduction. It's more of just the harmonic kind of tone of this compressor on that bass I really like. And then I use the old Voice of God, and this is just adding all the sub frequency in. So if we take a listen with this on and with it off, you'll hear what it's doing. If you're not listening on big monitors, you're probably not going to hear that huge difference, but if you've got headphones or you do have big monitors, you may hear that, and that's adding kind of a lot of kind of sub 40 hertz, 30 hertz, that kind of frequency in, and it's just kind of really thickening up the bass sound. And then we've got a second bass part here, which is an 808, I believe. That's just like a real low sub bass, and we're just adding the Voice of God again. So if we listen with that on and off, you'll hear what it's doing. Again, very little. You'll see here that I've got some automation. Now this automation would have happened because there would have been a bass note that would have just kind of really poked out, and there's multiple ways of kind of dealing with it, and I'll show you more as the mix goes on. But in this instance, I just decided to go back to basics, use volume automation. If it sounds too loud, just bring it down. If it's not loud enough, you just bring it up. So if we have a listen with this automation kind of not happening, you heard there that bass note really popped out. And then if we go back to how I had it with the automation on, you can see, although it does raise up, so you're still getting the dynamic of the bass and what the producer intended on having there, it's just not as kind of obvious. It kind of sits better, it fits better into the mix. And so, I did that across throughout. There was a couple of areas where it was happening, and so I just listened to the full track and went through, and it's only down a few dB, but it does make that difference, and it makes things kind of more kind of feel more together. Then if we take a look at the bass group bus, I've got some EQ going on. Again, this is kind of controlling the low sub frequencies along with the kick. So if we just take a listen with the other plugins off and then have a listen with this EQ only and bypass, so you can hear the difference. So you won't hear too much of a difference there, just because it's doing very, very subtle stuff, but I'm just kind of cleaning out the real low sub frequencies that no one's going to hear, and this is also going to help me get the mix louder as well. And then around this area was causing problems with the kick, and so I didn't want to kind of just take out that frequency across the whole bass. I only wanted that frequency to come out kind of when the kick was hitting that kind of same frequency. Now, I did do on the next plugin you'll see later on in the chain some side chain, which I don't often do, but after doing this, it was causing more problems still, and so that's why I went on to sidechain 2. But this just helps kind of clear up that kind of, having the kick there and the bass there, and so they're not together. So that was a little bit more EQ work than I sometimes do, but I felt like it needed to have that taken out on a dynamic EQ range just to enable me to kind of fit that kick in and for it not to kind of sound too muddy. So after I did that, I then went on to the Pro MB, and this is purely just controlling the low end of all of the basses together. So if we take a look at what this is doing with it on and with it off, again, just tucking it in. Then after that, I then decided to use Soothe, and this was something I did later on in the process because I felt with this song I was kind of really struggling to kind of get the kick to bang and get the bass to bang and basically have them both bang together. A lot of people kind of choose one or the other. The low end is the bass and the kick's the high end, but in the way the production was and the way it kind of felt, I wanted everything to kind of hit hard, and I wanted it to feel when you're listening to it, because this kind of genre is it's all about that beat, that boom ka ka boom ka. And so with that, along with the 808 and the bass, you've really got to kind of carve things out and to make things work. And in this instance, I actually used the Jason Joshua trick, technique that he does, where he side chains the kick, which you can see here that I've got going out of bus 127. And every time this kick hits, the bass kind of ducks as well. So if we take a look with the drums and the bass together, you'll see what this is doing. So you can see when that kick is hitting, that bass is ducking, and this Soothe is super fast. It's like so quick. You can, you don't really hear the pump. You just hear, each part kind of defined better, and it just sounded great. So I went with it. Then after that, we then got the synths. Again, the synths, they kind of really thought everything out. Again, not too much processing. If we look at the first synth we've got going on here, felt like I didn't need to do much to that, just made it a little bit wider, 50% wider. Let's take a listen with this on and off. So not huge amounts, again, very, very subtle. And then if we go to synth 2, so this synth was quite an important part. This was kind of holding the mid-range of the instruments of the track. So we did some EQ work, again, hardly anything. If we take a listen with this on and off. Just taking out some boxiness, just something that, it was muddying up and I felt like I just, needed to take it out. Then we got some Spectre again, and this is just boosting this kind of mid-range just to kind of warm up the overall sound, not to make it so thin. So you can see it just thickens it up a little bit. And then we got another synth going on here. It's like a riff. Again, some EQ. Just taking out the sharp frequencies. Let's listen with it on and off. Again, you may not notice it in solo, but cohesively in the mix together, you do. And then we've got the last synth in this track, which sounds like this. With this one, you can see it's got stabs, and I want it to kind of really emphasize that. And so I just brought out the frequencies of where those stabs were happening and just emphasized it with the transient. Again, I didn't want to bring up the sustain of the synth because it already had kind of reverb planted in, and I didn't want to increase the reverb and everything around it as well. I just wanted those notes at that frequency to be more kind of attacked. And so that's what I did here. So that's it for the synths, and then the synths go to a synth bus, and again, I didn't do anything on the synth bus here. It's not needed. Always think about why you're doing something, don't just add. And then we've got the main piano here, which sounds like this. If we just mute the processing, have a look at what we did. Just a frequency that was poking out, again, just reducing it. And then we added some more mid-range, similar to what we did with the other synth group, just adding a little bit more mid-range to the individual synths. We're doing it the same on this kind of piano sound, and it's just making it so it's not as thin, and just kind of finding the frequency where it's kind of making that sound like what it's meant to sound like and boosting it. And the kind of fundamental frequency that I felt like I needed was around 744. Let's have a listen to that with it on and with it off. So you can see it just brightens it up, and it is on a tube saturation, so it's adding some harmonic saturation to that, which is what this is. It's a saturator, but we're on a frequency dependent based saturation. So again, found the frequency I liked, and instead of just boosting it with an EQ, boost it with some saturation, just add a bit of grit, a bit of niceness, and a bit of kind of tonality to what they sent me. And it's working well in the track. And then lastly, just finished it off with the Fairchild UAD compressor, and I'm using the legacy version because it has this kind of tone to it, which kind of brightens everything up. And I wanted to kind of brighten this up and make it feel nice. So let's take a listen with this on and off, and you'll hear what it's doing. That's really doing a lot to that sound. And, it is adding a bit of volume, so it is a little bit of a trick. It's not necessarily, a fair contest, I guess, because I left the kind of the rising volume and just took it down on the fader if I needed to at that point in the mix. But you can really hear that it is adding a lot of kind of tonality, kind of a higher tonality to the track, and it's kind of adding brightness. And so, yeah, I love this compressor for that. So I do tend to kind of go for that instead of an EQ to brighten something up. But it depends on what you're given. And then after that, we've got some guitars going on. If we have a look at what the guitar is doing. Again, great playing, great guitar sound. Didn't have to do too much. If we just mute the previous plugin, let's just go on the EQ, and let's just take a listen with this on and with it off. Again, just frequencies that I felt like were boxy and were just kind of masking the guitar and just not making it sound clear. And as I say, they had reverb and delay on it, so I didn't have to do any of the effects. And then I brought out the good old Spectre again, and again, just increasing kind of saturation where I think this instrument should be placed in the mix. And it was around 1.4K, which is a popular kind of frequency for guitars, especially electric. So if we take a listen with this on and off, you'll hear what it's doing. You can hear there it's really brightening up that guitar and kind of making it come alive. You know, the playing is kind of making it more defined, making it more kind of brighter, a bit more happier, and so yeah, it felt good to do that. And then the next guitar we got going on, we can see I've got some automation going on as well, volume kind of rides, where I felt it was needed, but it's the same principle again. Let's take a listen. So we got a bit of EQ, again taking some high end off. I heard there was some high hiss, but they already had reverb in there, so I didn't want to use like a noise gate because I liked kind of the reverb sustain, so it was that fight. So what I did is I took some high end out. So it just eliminates that kind of white noise that seems to be on the printed on the track itself, probably amp noise or line noise coming from somewhere. And then we've got these frequencies here, which again is pretty kind of common frequencies for me to take out on electric guitars, and that's the the boxiness of guitars. So let's take a listen to these two frequencies. Now let's take a listen with this EQ on and off. Again, just controlling it in the mix. And then we've got the Spectre again. And again, that's just adding around 1.5K this time, just kind of, again, bringing the guitar alive, making it, where it needs to fit into the mix. Let's take a listen with this on and off and you'll hear what it's doing. Again, same principle as the previous guitar, it just felt good, and I've got a volume ride going up only a little bit. It's probably a dB, so it starts on 0, goes to less than a dB. So it just shows you how minimal some of this stuff is, but you just got to do what feels right to you, I guess. Now we've got the vocals. Now the vocals in this one was an interesting one because usually I do a lot of compression, a lot of effects, but I really didn't have to do too much. They really dialed in the vocals and how they liked it and how they wanted it. And they got me just to kind of improve what they had, by 5%. So, I didn't feel like I needed to go in there and kind of either show off all these plugins and, make things kind of, dramatic differences. The main thing that I do, and I always say this to people when it comes down to vocals, is clean up the vocals, clean up the breaths, check your clicks and all of that sort of stuff, the decrackle, all of the RX, well, that's your best friend in that sort of stuff. And I feel like by just cleaning up the vocal before you do anything already brings your vocal mixing up, a notch. There's nothing worse than hearing clicks and pops and breaths in vocals. Even if you've got the perfect EQ and the perfect compression settings, there's still a breath in there that's too loud, or there's still a click. Like, to me, in my ears, they're quite sensitive because, I do this all the time. And so I really kind of value when I hear mixes and it's like they're perfectly clean. And, it's not always about necessarily being clean, because in rock music, you don't want it perfectly clean. But a click is a click. If there's a click in a vocal, there's a click in a vocal. It doesn't matter what genre it is in. So first up, that's what I do. So I did the RX declick and decrackle, which you can see here on the waveform. It says RX, so that's kind of gone through that process. Now let's just take a listen to the vocal itself so we can actually hear what we're working with.
For the wall as I sip my drink, they watch them as they come and go. Pop in my head to the jams. Here comes Arewa, epitome of a woman. Can it be you and me? I they find, so me tell her say, you're so fine, oh yeah. Your beauty so rare. Hey, can I hold you, baby? No fear. I wanna dance with you. Oh yeah.
Again, great vocalist, well recorded, sounds good. They've obviously timed it, like they've obviously done some editing their side as well, and it just sounds great. So let's just take a listen with the plugins, with all my plugins off, so you can hear how it actually came to me.
For the wall as I sip my drink, they watch them as they come and go. Pop in my head to the jams. Here comes Arewa, epitome of a woman. Can it be you and me? I they find, so me tell her say, You're so fine, oh yeah.
Sounds amazing. So first up, I felt like there was a little bit too much kind of S in that vocal. It was a very bright vocal sound, which is great, especially in a lot of kind of pop stuff. It's all about the vocal being bright. But the problem with making things super bright is you are really kind of emphasizing all the top end, all the S's, all the per, the ters, the S, and all that. And I felt like there was a little bit too much in it. Now, I could have gone for a de-esser, but I'm using this new plugin lately, the Split EQ. And with that, you can reduce the transient, as mentioned. And so I'm reducing the transients of the S's and all of the high stuff that I just feel like is too much in that recording. So if we take a listen with this plugin on and off, and then I'll solo the actual band so you can hear what it's doing.
For the wall as I sip my drink, they watch them as they come and go. But in my head to the jams, here comes Arewa, epitome of a woman. Can it be you and me? I they find so me tell her say, you're so fine, oh yeah. Your beauty so rare, can I hold you, baby, no fear. I wanna dance with you, oh yeah, yeah. Can I hug you, oh yeah. Cause of the perfume you did wear, like I be the one you did call your dear.
So you can hear there, it's not much, but it's just enough for me to hear it. So again, just taking out what, when I soloed that band there, those S's, that kind of brightness, that sharpness of the vocal tone, that's just come down. So subtle stuff, but it does the job and it works. Then after that, we go into some EQ, again, just using the Pro Q3 again. And this, I'm just taking out certain frequencies that I don't like. So let's just have a listen with this on and with it off and you'll hear what it's doing.
For the wall as I sip my drink, they watch them as they come and go. But in my head to the jams, here comes Arewa, epitome of a woman. Can it be you and me? I they find so me tell her say, you're so fine, oh yeah. Your beauty so rare.
So that's doing quite a big difference. That's taking out kind of all the high frequencies that I didn't like, controlling that lower, kind of the mid-range a little bit more in the vocals so it's not too boxy, and also taking out this digital sound that I've been talking about. It's that kind of real high end that I just felt like was becoming too much to my ears. So if we just solo the band so you can actually hear what it is I'm taking out.
The jams, yeah. Can it be you? Your beauty so.
So overall, you can just hear that I'm just finding frequencies that I don't like and reducing them and just shaping the vocal to how I like it. Then next up, we got the Spectre, again, saturation, and I didn't even do anything. I did absolutely nothing in this plugin, so forget about that plugin. And then after that, we've then got a duet, it's called, the vocal here.
You're so fine, oh yeah. Your beauty so that I hold you, baby, no fear. I wanna dance with you, oh yeah, yeah. Can I hug you, oh yeah. Hey, cause of the perfume you did wear, like I be.
So we've got like a duet, a second vocalist, or a vocal doing a harmony, but still part of the lead vocal. And I'm doing the same sort of thing, split EQ. And then you can see on this EQ, it's slightly different notches, and that's just because, it's singing in a harmony of the lead vocal, so it's not hitting the same kind of notes, and so they all have different harmonic frequencies. And so here, if we just take a look at the differences.
So that oh yeah.
Again, very subtle stuff. And then we got the Spectre, and I did actually add some in this one. I added some brightness. I just felt like it needed brightening up. So if we have a listen with this plugin on and off, you'll hear what it's doing.
You're so fine, oh yeah. Your beauty so that baby, no fear. I wanna dance with you, oh yeah, yeah. Can I hug you, oh yeah. Hey, cause of the perfume you did wear, like I be the one you did call your dear.
So I just wanted to define that top end and make it slightly different to the other lead as well. Again, it's all about kind of blending the two vocals together. They were both lead vocals, but one was doing like a harmony and a little bit different melody. And so, it's all about making them work together. And in that case, I felt like I needed to brighten that one up just to kind of, I guess, in context, work with the other vocal. So that's what I did there. After that, we got the ad-libs. Let's have a look at what we're doing here.
Oh yeah.
So you can hear they're just kind of, ad-libs across the track, and they've already done the effects. They've already kind of placed them where they want them. You saw at the start there, it was filtered and then it opened up. So I didn't change any of that. They'd already done that work for me. And just using split EQ again, just taking out frequencies that I just feel like were not needed, and that sharpness, and that's what that's doing. And then a Pro Q3 in the mid-range. If we have a look at what that's doing. Again, very kind of small changes. And then in this section here, you'll see that I've cut the ad lib, and that's because I wanted it to pan kind of around the lead vocal, because this was going across the solo and the instrumental. So if you have a listen where that is. And I felt like in that section of the song, originally that vocal was kind of mono, it was center, and I wanted it to kind of float around, because I felt like the way that the song was building up in that solo, the solo was quite plucky, but kind of open at the same time, and it was like you were going somewhere different with the song. And I felt like the vocal ad-lib could go with that as well, that kind of moving around. And so what I did is it's the same plugins that were on the previous ad-libs. I've just added the Soundtoys Pan Man, which I love, and that is just kind of alternating between the speaker left and right, just adding movement. So if we have a listen in solo, you'll hear what that's actually doing. So just by adding that pan kind of really has that kind of effect of this like 3D image kind of going around you in that section. And the vocals in general in this song, are very kind of up, in the middle, kind of in your face. And I just felt like that, as I said earlier, it just gave me that movement that I felt like I needed. So that was a bit of a creative mixing part that I did there, and it worked for the track. Then after that, we've got a load of harmonies, which again, they've probably kind of, consolidated them into one BGV track, which I can see here. Again, I didn't have to do much of the balance. They had already decided how they liked the balance. So if we just solo what the backing vocals are.
You're so fine, oh yeah. Your beauty's so rare. Hey, can I hold you, baby, no fear.
Again, same plugin, split EQ. I won't bypass them just because we've already seen that, what it is I'm doing. But again, finding the frequency, taking it out, using this as a de-esser, which you can see here around 10K, and just ducking it around 3 dB, just because I don't like that sound. It sounded too harsh to me. And then after that, we've got some EQ. Again, I felt like for some reason the backing vocals were really essy and bright. So if we actually have a listen with this plugin on and off, just because this does make quite a big difference to the top end.
You're so fine, oh yeah. Your beauty's so rare. Hey, can I hold you, baby, no fear. I wanna dance with you, oh yeah, yeah, yeah. Can I hug you, oh yeah. Hey, 'cause of the perfume you didn't wear. So rare. I wanna dance with you.
Again, same, kind of frequencies, finding the ones I don't like, taking them out. And then we've got some more backing vocals here. I'm not sure why I split this, but it looks like I probably did a different EQ move on the split EQ. I just made it a little bit wider by the looks of it. Again, I felt like in that part of the song, it just, I didn't want to take too much of the S out, but I also wanted to kind of widen the band a little bit, just to kind of get more frequencies that was annoying me, but in one plugin instead of having to use another plugin. So if we have a listen to that.
It's like something ignites my life.
I don't know why I did that, I don't remember, but I definitely would have put it onto another track for some reason, and it looks like it was to do with the split EQ. Then we've got a reverse vocal coming in here. Sounds brilliant, had nothing to do with that, didn't do anything, didn't touch it, so that's all good. So that's it for the harmonies. Now after I've kind of done all of the main lead vocals, backing vocals, I then have a section here where it's delay throws, and this is kind of where I'm doing more of the creative mixing, filling out space, finding things that just needs that extra kind of little bit of kind of 1% to make the mix just a little bit more interesting. And in this case, I do have some kind of setup in my template. You can see here I muted one, so I was experimenting, but I went with a Valhalla delay on certain words, and it looks like I'm just taking out some high end using the tape broken projector. Shout out to Jesse Ray. I saw that he was using that, tried it out, and it worked kind of really well in this song. You know, you got to experiment, play around, see what works, but this is a preset which is in the sound effects, reverbs, and tape broken. Tape verb it's called, so it's a form of reverb. I suppose a reverb is a delay in some form, but yeah, so I use that. So if we just have a listen to that in solo, and you'll hear what that is doing. So if you have a listen to that reverb kind of flare with the lead vocal, you hear what that's doing.
Be the one you did call your dear. You are the kind to call my own. She ain't that like a goddess, stepping's like a tigress, oh. Body swing like a commotion, yeah. Baby, shoot why they call me Mr. Dollar. I don't they look your face, is a.
So you can really hear it's adding quite a lot to the mix. You know, if you play the full mix with those delay throws, you'll really hear kind of what that's doing.
Call your dear, you are the kind to call my own. She ain't that like a goddess, stepping's like a tigress, oh. Body swing like a commotion, yeah. Baby, shoot why they call me Mr. Dollar.
You can see it really adds to it, and so, you know, that was a really kind of nice touch. And we've got another one here at the end going into the solo.
You are the kind to call my own.
Just like enters this new space in the mix. So that was a really kind of fun thing to add. And then after all of that, I then have in my mixing template an all vocal bus and an instrumental bus. And it just means I can solo the instrumental or I can solo the vocal, so I can hear what everything sounds like together. And it also allows me to process everything as one. So if we just listen to the a cappella of the vocal, so that's all of the harmonies, the ad-libs, the leads, everything as one in solo. And then I'm going to show you how I process that bus so you can hear what it's doing.
They find some me tell us, you're so fine, oh yeah. Your beauty so that hey, can I hold you, baby, no fear. I wanna dance with you, oh yeah, yeah. Can I hug you, oh yeah. Hey, cause of the perfume you did wear. Make I be the one you did call your dear. You are the kind to call my own.
So I decided to do quite a bit of processing on the all vocal bus. Now, again, I don't always do this. It really is song dependent, but I just felt like I wanted to kind of do some final EQ touches and just add a little bit of magic just to all the vocals as one. So if we kind of take all of the plugins off, and you'll hear the difference with all of the plugins off and then with all the plugins on.
They find some me tell us, you're so fine, oh yeah. Your beauty so that hey, can I hold you, baby, no fear. I wanna dance with you, oh yeah, yeah. Can I hug you, oh yeah. Hey, cause of the perfume you did wear. Make I be the one you did call your dear. You are the kind to call my own. You're so fine, oh yeah.
So if we actually look at what I'm doing, so if we just take all of the plugins off and go one by one. So first up, I've got the EQ, and this EQ is, again, would have been something I would have added towards the end of the mix when I'm listening. Is there frequencies poking out? Kind of what is it? Is it a problem with all of the vocals, individual kind of elements within the vocals? Now, I would always say to people, you know, don't try and fix a problem on a sub kind of group, fix a problem within the group. Now, that is true, but sometimes it's not necessarily because of one thing. It could be a buildup of multiple vocals together causing a problem. And that's kind of when I do a lot of bus processing, you know, when I'm finding those issues. And in this case, there was a couple of frequencies that were popping out when all of the vocals were in together. So if we have a listen to those frequency bands kind of individually, so you can hear what that is.
Hey, can I?
So, you know, they are kind of very tight notches, and they were just things that were just really sensitive to my ear. And that could have been the mic, could have been the room, it could have been multiple things that was causing those frequencies to kind of really be sensitive to me. And so it was only happening when all of the vocals were together, and so that's why I did it on the bus. And then after that, I've got the C1 comp by Waves, and this is just taking around 2.7k out, just a really harsh frequency. So if we just have a listen to that frequency alone.
dance with you, oh yeah, yeah. Can I hug you, oh yeah. Hey, cause of the perfume you did wear. Make I be the one you did call your dear. You are the kind to call my own.
So that is literally just taking a dB out of 2.7k, another harsh frequency, but I didn't want to take it out on the EQ because I didn't want to take it out completely. I just wanted to take it out kind of when it was slowly building up and it was becoming too much in, you know, the tone or the chord of that part of the song where it was hitting, and I wanted it to duck it down. So that's why I did it with a multi-band style compressor instead. And then I've used some tape, and again, this is just to warm up the vocal. This Slate virtual tape machine just adds this kind of mid-range to the vocal, which just sounds pleasant to my ears. So if we have a listen with this on and off, you'll hear what it's doing.
Divine, so me tell us, you're so fine, oh yeah. Your beauty so rare. Hey, can I hold you, baby, no fear. I wanna dance with you, oh yeah, yeah.
So you can see it's just adding kind of some tape saturation, some bit of warmth to the vocal, and as I say, it's kind of affecting the mid-range of the vocal, and especially on kind of male vocals, it really, you know, is nice to add that kind of, you know, part of the male voice where it kind of is really kind of forward, I guess, and it kind of pushes the vocals a bit more forward into the mix and just tonally makes it nicer. And then after that, I've got the Pro MB. Now the Pro MB is just kind of controlling all of the separate frequencies across the frequency spectrum. In this case, I've got 4 bands of it, and that's just kind of sitting the vocals into the mix and just making them sit better as a group along with the instrumental. So if we have a listen with this on and off, you'll hear what it's doing.
Divine, so me tell us, you're so fine, oh yeah. Your beauty so rare. Hey, can I hold you, baby, no fear. I wanna dance with you, oh yeah, yeah.
So you can hear there, that's just controlling all the vocals as one with the instrumental. And then just to kind of finalize everything, I just put a very little bit of light compression on the overall group, and that's just to kind of control any kind of loose kind of peaks that are popping out. But again, you know, medium attack, medium release, just kind of keeping it so everything is just smooth and leveled out. Again, probably half a dB max of compression on this end chain of the vocal.
You're so fine, oh yeah. Your beauty so rare. Hey, can I hold you, baby, no fear. I wanna dance with you, oh yeah, yeah. Can I hug you, oh yeah. Hey,
so you can see it's just kind of gluing all the vocals together as one. Very, very subtle stuff. You could probably use only half the plugins that I've used on that kind of all vocal bus, but you know, I just did what I felt at the time. You know, everything I do has a reason, and if I don't have a reason to do something, I will not put the plugin on for the sake of it. So again, I'm just kind of, you know, hearing things, you know, what the mix is telling me, doing it, and then, you know, if it turns out to have only 2 plugins on the all vocal bus, then great. If it's 5, then that's also okay. It's just whatever the track needs, and every track is different. And then after that, we then got the instrumental bus, which is just the instrumental only. So if we have a listen to that. So if we have a look at the all instrumental bus, I'm just doing some very, very subtle shaping on the instrumental bus. And, you know, it's a little bit of a trick that I have because, you know, a lot of people just have everything going to the mix bus. But what I like to do is separate the instrumental and the vocals. So they've got their, you know, each buses, and then those 2 buses then go to the mix bus, because it just allows me to kind of do some final EQ touches, as you saw what I did with the vocals, without it affecting everything. Now, it's a little bit of a cheat way, but it works, and I like doing it. And at the end of the day, it's about the final result. Does it sound good to your ears? Do you like it? If that's the case, then go with it. And so here, I just felt like there was a subtle build up in the instrumental around kind of this 46 hertz area. So I'm just controlling it very slightly with some EQ. So if we have a listen with this on and off, you'll hear what it's doing. Again, these 2 bottom frequencies around here, you're probably not going to hear them if you're listening to this on a laptop. If you're in a big studio on speakers, or you're in headphones with a good range, then you're probably going to hear what that you know, that's doing. But that's just really controlling the subs and kind of just making things kind of just be a bit kind of smoother and fit better within the mix. It's hard to explain because everything is within context with what I've done previous. But, you know, these kind of final adjustments were just things that I felt like was a build up from multiple things, a bit like the vocals. And so, you know, some people would argue and say, well, why don't I just fix that in the bass? But not necessarily about the bass. It could be because of the bass and the drums together. You know, you can always fix things individually, but, you know, sometimes you've got to fix things as a group. I really believe that, and so that's why I've done that. And then both of the instrumental bus and the all vocal bus go to a mix bus, and on the mix bus, and for those of you that haven't watched previous videos, I do mix into the mix bus. So this mix bus is from the start, apart from the limiter. And, you know, things will kind of change throughout that. Like I will change the compression, you know, how much, the attack and the release, and play around with that, because that will vary from, you know, track to track. So if we go through the mix bus one by one, add the plugins in, you'll see what it's doing. So first up, we've got some saturation. So if we listen with this on and then with it off, you'll hear. It's just adding some harmonic saturation in. To me, it's just making the mix kind of sound more alive without, you know, doing much. Just literally 31% of saturation, you know, not much going on at all. Then after that, we go into the Bax EQ, and this is just kind of doing a little bit of like a smiley face EQ, and just doing a high cut and a low cut, and just to make sure that I'm, you know, not kind of overloading certain frequencies. So, you know, I've got a high pass at 18 hertz. Again, the human ear is 20 to 20,000 hertz. There's no need to have below 20 in a mix. Again, this is allowing me to achieve loudness without crapping out the limiter, and just giving me a little bit of like an oomph on the kind of the mid range to the top as well. So that's what I've got going on there. So let's have a listen with this on and off. So you can hear that again, very subtle. Then after that, I go into the SSLG compressor. This is probably my favorite mix bus compression. The auto function on the release is just incredible. Nothing out there like it. It just really glues the mix together. Now, you know, sometimes I will have it on 1 or 3. It depends, but in this case, I decided to have it on auto. I do use auto quite a lot, but it does depend on the genre a bit. I just felt with this track, it really glued everything. So, you know, so that's kind of my starting kind of go, you know, attack on 30 in auto, and then I'll change this if I want more attack or less attack. But again, it's a feel thing. It's what works for the tracks. You just got to play around, kind of over compress it, play around with the attack and release, find the sweet spot of what you like, and then take the threshold and turn it down so it's not as compressed. And I aim for around, you know, 1 or 2 dB of compression just on the overall mix, just to keep it kind of intact, I guess. So let's have a listen with this on and off. So again, really, really subtle, you know, just about 2 dB of gain reduction there. So not much at all. And then after that, I go into the BXV3, which I'm doing some real tight notch frequencies on the mono section of the mix. You know, it's just a mid-side EQ, so I'm just doing it on the mono. But I felt like, you know, there were some frequencies that was kind of building up with the vocals and the instrumental together. But, you know, I'm not doing much. I'm doing a -1 dB across. You know, I'm not doing, you know, 5 dB or 6 dB on the mix bus. You know, I'm talking real minimal kind of reduction on this EQ, because, you know, I will say if you're doing 5 or 6 dB kind of EQ reduction, you've probably got an issue with the mix. So fix the mix before you do it on the mix bus. But this is just giving me a bit of, you know, salt and pepper on the mix, and just cleaning things up slightly. So if we have a look at the frequencies that I'm taking out 1 dB of. So again, they were just, you know, very, you know, small, you know, things that I felt like I needed to do to the mix just to finish it off. And then to add the last little bit on this plugin, I just put a 10% width on there, and it just gave me a little bit more stereo width on the overall track, and it sounded nice to my ears. You know, again, that will change depending on the song. You know, if it's a more kind of mono based song, you know, I'm not going to widen everything a lot. but you know, they pre-panned everything in this mix, and they, you know, they created how they wanted it. I just wanted to give it that little bit of extra kind of push and energy in the side, so I just added a 10% width on there. That's all. And then after that we go into some ozone, and I'm doing a fair bit of mastering here, I guess. I'm controlling the low end on the dynamics around up to 110 hertz. Again, this is just controlling all the low end, so when you're hearing it in the car or playback, it's, you know, the low end is controlled and it's not gonna, again, crap out the limiter or just be really bass heavy. So I really pay attention to this detail, and this actually will change at the end of the mix as well. You know, I'll mix into a little bit of this, but you know, it won't be on minus 13.4, it'll be kind of further up, and then as the mix kind of progresses, I'll bring this down, and I'm aiming for, you know, literally half a dB, max a dB of reduction on that low end. So not much at all, and that's at 121 hertz. So if we just solo that band so you can hear what that band is. So that's just when the kick is hitting, it's just making sure that things are just not pushing kind of too much of that bottom end. It's controlling it. That's what this, you know, is doing. It's controlling the low end up to 120 hertz. And then after that, I've got the exciter, and I tend to do this quite a lot in the mastering kind of stage. This is kind of the mid-range and the high end. And again, this is just a taste. I really love the tape saturation, you know, on this part of the exciter. You know, if you've got quite a lot going on in the mix, quite a dense mix, it kind of really brings out the vocals, and it brings out all the nice parts and everything, and pushes that forward. So I really like this. So if you have a listen to what this is doing. With that, it's actually bringing out the backing vocals quite a bit. You know, the backing vocals were already pre-panned, and adding that excitement at that frequency of those backing vocals kind of makes them feel louder and kind of more wide without doing that, if that makes sense, because it's just an exciter. And then after that, I've got the Oxford Inflator. This is one of those plugins I've never really known what it does, but you put it on and it just sounds better. And I always do the 3 light trick. Shout out to Billy Decker. He always said, you know, just push it to 3 lights, leave it, it's done. So I load it up, put it on, push it. Again, this will depend on your gain staging and kind of, you know, where the mix is. But I've got a 37.9% effect for it to have 3 yellow lights. So let's just have a listen with this on and off, and you'll hear what it's doing. Billy, you were right. The 3 lights on that Oxford Inflator is how you achieve a fantastic mix. I'm kidding, but no, that was a good trick he mentioned in one of his videos. And you know, when you hear things and you're like, oh, I'm going to remember that. That's one thing I do remember. Oxford Inflator, 3 lights on the mix bus, happy days. And then after I've done that, I then go into a clipper, and this clipper here is just kind of allowing me to get a bit of loudness, you know, and it's not adding volume at this stage yet, but what it's doing is just clipping off the peaks. Now, I used a clipper on the drums as well, and that was just to kind of control the drums, but this time this clipper is controlling the overall mix before it goes into the limiter. So there'll be different transients, could be from the vocals, the drums as well, the guitars, the solo. So everything that this is causing within the mix itself, this clipper is doing probably around max 1 dB of clipping. And it just means when I go into my final limiter, as I said before, it's just kind of not crapping out and not overloading the limiter, and it's just making the limiter work less, but I get more volume out the limiter. So let's just have a listen to this clipper with it on and off, and you'll hear what it's doing. So no difference in volume there because the gain and the output is matched, but it is doing around a dB of clipping on average, sometimes less, sometimes more, depending on the transits that's going into it, of the arrangement of the song. And then after that, I've got the limiter, and this limiter is pushing up the volume basically, and I've got it on the all-round style. I love this. I tend to mix into the all-round style. I will sometimes change it to, you know, transparent or punchy or dynamic, depending on the song, but usually all-round is my favorite, so I tend to go to that. And the gain going in will again change for the LUFS level that I'm trying to achieve. So let's just have a look at, you know, what it is I'm doing.
Divine, so me tell her, say, you're so fine, oh yeah. Your beauty so that I can hold you, baby, no fear. I wanna dance with you, oh yeah, yeah. Gonna hug you, oh yeah. Like cause of the perfume you did wear. Like I be the one you did call your dear. You are the kind to call my own. You're so fine, oh yeah. Your beauty so that I can hold you, baby, no fear. I wanna dance with you, oh yeah, yeah. Gonna hug you, oh yeah. Like cause of the perfume you did wear. Make I be the one you did call your dear. You are the kind to call my own.
So I'm actually doing quite a bit of heavy limiting. I'm getting up to around 5 or 6 dB, but that's fine. It sounded good. It's not sounding like it's overworking to me. I'm getting it to a good kind of -7 LUFS volume, which is competitive in this current day. So, you know, that is, again, a feel thing. You know, you've got to look at the numbers as well, because you've got to be competitive. You know, I know there's this whole loudness war, but, you know, at the end of the day, you know, the client is going to want to put this track on, and they're going to play, you know, another track, and they're going to want it to have it, you know, be just as loud. So you have to take that, you know, into consideration as well when you're, you know, mastering the mix, or, you know, putting a limiter on it. And so that's kind of how I mixed this full song from start to finish. I really hope you guys enjoyed it. Again, if you've got any questions, please don't forget to leave them in the comments below, and I'll answer all of them as quick as I can. But that's kind of my process when it comes down to mixing a full song. And as you saw, you know, there's not too much going on. It's just lots of small things that add up to make, you know, the final picture. So I hope you guys learned a little bit from this, or take something away from it. And yeah, I'll see you all again next week for another video.